Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we commemorate Moms Equal Pay Day. Just giving everybody a moment to get started on Zoom and to join us. And as we do that, let me begin by sharing that Moms Equal Pay Day is a symbolic day that we use to raise awareness around and to combat the inequalities of the impact of pay inequalities. For those who aren't aware, in the US, women working full-time year-round are paid 74 cents on the dollar in comparison to their male colleagues. And the disparity gets even worse when we look at part-time and seasonal workers. When we're looking at all working mothers, we see that moms are only being paid 62 cents to every dollar paid to dads. To put it in different terms, our friends at the National Partnership for Women and Families looked at if the gap between the wages of working women and men were eliminated, a mother in the United States would have enough money to pay for 2.4 more years of food. Another way to look at that would be 11 more months of mortgage and utilities payments, or 18 more months of rent. We know that working mothers are facing a variety of systemic challenges to their economic security, including the motherhood penalty, lack of paid leave, and the persistent gender wage gap. So this afternoon, we have an incredible panel joining us today to talk about these issues and what we can do to begin to address them. So let me do some quick introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to everyone. First, I'd like to introduce Gloria Blackwell, the Chief Executive Officer with the American Association of University Women. We're also joined by Dr. Jennifer Turner, the Senior Research Associate, Student Parent Success with the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Taylor Alston, Campaign Manager on Workplace Justice with Moms Rising Together and Moms Rising Education Fund. And last but not least is Deborah J. Vegans, the National Campaign Director and Director of Equal Pay Today with Equal Rights Advocates. So with that, my name is Megan Cassell. I'm the Senior Policy Director over at American Association of University Women. I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to our panel. Gloria, would you start us off by sharing a little bit more about the motherhood penalty and how does it impact the overall economy? Oh, Gloria,
Thanks. Thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So the motherhood penalty really is a phenomenon by which women's pay decreases once they become a mom. And unfortunately, women often take a major hit when they do become mothers. That penalty reduces earnings on average about the wage penalty is about 15%, a 15% decrease in every child under the age of 5. And it is really a persistent penalty that takes place up until around 10 years of age when children become more independent. The penalty also involves the fact that hiring mothers are less likely to hire mothers than they are women who have children, who don't have children, and they offer a lower salary to mothers than they do to women without children. And that is a penalty that follows women very often throughout their careers. And so men, by contrast, do not suffer a penalty when they become fathers. In fact, there is evidence and research that demonstrates that there's actually a fatherhood bonus when men become dads, and that their earnings actually increase they don't decrease like women. And so the motherhood penalty really is caused by a number of factors, most of which we are quite familiar with, right? It's systemic bias and stereotypes and discrimination against women. Also, the sort of longstanding societal norms about motherhood, the absence of really effective public policies that really focus on how families can be given full support. And the impact of that penalty really is that women are not being able to, meet their financial obligations, and that they're really being financially penalized for having children, which we know contributes to the gender pay gap. It really puts mothers at an economic disadvantage. They're not bringing in the necessary income, and women keep playing catch up, to get back on that path that they were on before they became mothers. It results in a decrease in savings, the ability to contribute to retirement accounts, and as we also know, to pay off those student loans that women have hold a disproportionate amount of. And it really has an impact on women's overall economic and financial security. It has also resulted in fewer women being in the workforce and having an impact on the economic growth of our country, due to the fact that when people are earning less, they're actually, paying fewer taxes, less able to buy a home. And obviously, if you're earning less, you are spending less. And so working mothers are also, because of the penalty, often shut out of leadership roles because, unfortunately, some employers assume that women's caregiving really makes them unsuitable candidates for very demanding or challenging roles in the workplace. So in order for women to thrive economically, the motherhood penalty really is something that needs to be addressed, in addition to obviously the other gender-based discrimination that exists in the workplace. It's really important that recognition of women, not just as caregivers, but also recognition of women as breadwinners is taken into account, and that we really need employers to adapt to the modern workplace and enter 2023 and really leave 1953 behind us. Addressing pay equity is key to that, and just looking at all of the other issues impacting women, including the exorbitant cost of childcare and the need for paid family and sick leave. All of these things are paramount in addressing the motherhood penalty. And really, as a mom of three who had an infant and a toddler and an elementary schooler all on deck at the same time, I'm really quite familiar with the challenges and the sacrifices of motherhood and the impact on our careers. So thank you for that question, Megan.
Well, thank you for starting us off. You began to touch on this, and Dr. Turner, I'm wondering if you can help dive a little bit further into things. We know that these are issues that are impacting different women differently. And you've looked at the research. Can you tell us a little bit more about the disproportionate impact on women of color and low-income women of the pay gap and the motherhood penalty?
Yes, and first of all, thank you all for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Yes, so Gloria did a great job of getting us started off, kind of alluding to some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And so actually, IWPR just released a fact sheet where we talk about this. Our research shows that Black women were paid substantially less than white men in each state across the United States, whether they worked full-time year-round or whether all earnings are included. So we know that the pay gap for Black women, between Black women and white men, is huge. We also know that Black women continue to be overrepresented in undervalued care and service jobs and underrepresented in professions such as construction, manufacturing, and IT. So essentially, Black women continue to be underrepresented in the highest paying professions, despite the fact that Black women as a whole are a pretty highly educated group. Our research also in the student parent area shows that Black women actually enter college at higher rates than white, Hispanic, and Black men. but they still face barriers to degree attainment, such as mounting student debt and limited financial resources. So one of the ways to address these pay disparities for Black women, and particularly for Black single mothers, which is where my research focuses, is to advance educational attainment, so increase access to education. I'll go into some ways that we can do that. In the research that we've done on Black single mothers, we found that some of the barriers they face, the major barriers, are the challenge of juggling work, school, and family, something that researchers have called time poverty. So essentially, they don't have enough time to get everything done. And this is something that we're finding in a study that we're currently undergoing, where we're looking at Black single mother community college students. And one of the questions that we asked them was, if you could describe a typical day, like what is that like for you? And I mean, it's not surprising at all, but they do not have a lot of time for themselves. Many of them are working on very little sleep. They're managing, and they're managing work full-time with school full-time sometimes, and raising children, often with very little help, or sometimes they are fortunate enough to have help. As Gloria mentioned, also lack of access to quality, affordable childcare is huge. One of the policy recommendations that we make is that Congress increase funding for the Child Care Access Means Parents in School Act, or C-Campus. And what this act does is it provides funding for college campuses to either already establish or enhance the childcare that colleges have on their campuses. So this obviously is crucial to helping Black single moms and student parents generally access education. Another thing that we can do to address these issues is obviously provide student debt relief. That's something that has been in the news a lot lately. But that's a huge issue for student parents who are disproportionately low income and first generation students. And then we also, I think Gloria alluded to the childcare crisis. So this disproportionately impacts mothers' employment. Obviously, as we know, mothers still do the majority of the caregiving. And we know that childcare workers continue to be underpaid and undervalued. So these are huge issues that need to be addressed. Another potential policy solution is to fully equip social services programs to meet the needs of student parents. So things like TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Some of these programs have stipulations where pursuing education doesn't count as work, like TANF has that stipulation. And so eliminating those types of regulations will really help with the limited financial resources aspects that affects Black student parents. And then investing in Black women and Black mothers, we're talking about a group of women whose earning potential is not being tapped into. And so we know that Black women need better, higher paying jobs with flexible work options and good benefits such as paid leave and sick leave. Our research shows that actually Black women lack access to paid leave, and they also lack access to flexible work options such as remote work and jobs with predictable work schedules. So increasing access to those things is crucial. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. I think that really helps lay out the variety of issues that working moms are facing. And on that note, Taylor, for Moms Rising, you hear from your members on a whole variety of issues. And could you help personalize this? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from your members about how this is impacting people?
Sure, Megan. Thank you for the chance to be with you all today. First, Moms Rising is a million-member online and on-the-ground organization working to improve family economic security, stop discrimination against moms and women, and build a nation where businesses and families can both thrive. We have members in every state, all 50 states, and we work at the local, state, and federal levels to advance fair pay for moms and for all women. The economic disruption of the pandemic caused we saw that there was a mass exodus of women from the workforce, right? Um, but now women are finally back in the workforce and we're employed in record numbers. Um, but women and moms in particular are experiencing the painful and punitive wage gap that is depressing wages and causing harm to our families and also our communities. Most moms in their first 18 years of parenting will be the primary breadwinner at one point, at some point. I think Gloria mentioned this. And so the wage gap has real life implications for moms trying to put food on the table, gas in their cars, buy school supplies for their kids, pay off their own student loans while trying to save for their child's education, in addition to saving for retirement. And so we've seen this play out with some of our members. With a member in Connecticut. Her name is Amanda. Her first job out of law school was at a law firm in Connecticut, and she was told that she was getting paid the standard first year salary, but soon discovered that she was being paid 20% less than two of her male colleagues hired for the same position. Amanda had to fight tooth and nail for equal pay, but then she was discriminated against when she became pregnant. And so we know that there are some policy solutions to issues just like this that Amanda was having in Connecticut. We need a national standard for paid leave, right? We need to provide families with time and resources so that they can address their own health conditions, the health conditions of family members, the birth or adoption of a child. They need the time without having to worry about their paycheck. But not only do our families helped with policies like this, but also the economy and businesses are helped. Women make up more than half of the workforce in this country, and a national paid leave policy would help businesses retain competent, trained employees so that supply chains and business practices aren't disrupted, and also to keep them from having to recruit and retrain and all the costs associated with that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I have a feeling that there's a lot of Amandas out there that think that they're being paid equitably only to find out that that's not the case. And this is something that I know all of our organizations have really been fighting hard about, both on the state and the federal level. And for that reason, Deborah, I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the specific policies. We've alluded to them, but what can Congress do? And where are there some opportunities here?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Megan. And first, I want to thank you. I want to thank Gloria and the entire AAUW team for this webinar and for inviting me. I'm honored to be a former AAUW alumna, so I recognize and appreciate your incredible research and advocacy in the field. And, as with all civil rights efforts, we can only make change when we harness our collective action. And so I'm proud to work under the umbrella of Equal Pay Today. And that is a project of equal rights advocates. It's a nationwide campaign. All of the wonderful organizations here and many more are represented, bringing together local, state, and national groups and supporters around the country to help focus on policy solutions and other movement building solutions to close race and gender wage gaps, looking to accelerate progress at the state level that will ultimately drive federal policy reform. And speaking of collective action for federal policy reform, I did want to name just a few of the bills that we think will help, frankly, with all working parents. But I also want to make sure that I'm echoing the policy solutions that Jennifer mentioned, Taylor mentioned. There are many drivers of the wage gap, and there isn't one solution. That's no surprise. But for Moms Equal Pay Day, we organize around a few. So we all know that cultural stereotypes and workplaces designed around workers without childcare responsibilities deeply impact women who are both employees and caretakers. Yet Pay discrimination and lack of paid leave, for example, in many jobs held by women continue to hold them back, which impacts, obviously, their economic security now and future opportunities. And so for this Moms Equal Pay Day, we've called on Congress to address these issues by focusing on three main pieces of federal legislation. The first is the Paycheck Fairness Act. And this bill would modernize and strengthen the Equal Pay Act of 1963. So you heard Gloria allude to, we're not in 1953 anymore, and she's exactly right. We've learned a lot since the passage of the very first Equal Pay Acts. We've learned how discrimination operates in the workplace, and we need our laws to evolve. And a law that was passed in 1963 is incredibly important. But we need new tools to combat pay discrimination and to close the wage gap, looking at things like protecting workers from retaliation when they want to discuss their pay in the workplace, equalizing remedies for other civil rights statutes that have been passed over time, banning the use of prior salary history when setting wages, because we know that if you suffered from pay discrimination and you get a new job and they use your last salary, even a well-intentioned employer is carrying forward the impact of wage discrimination. And we also need to be codifying pay data collection. The EEOC has been working now for many years to get more data from employers about pay data collection. We're very hopeful they'll continue to move forward, but we need federal legislation codifying this type of collection. All of that is in the Paycheck Fairness Act, and that's why this is an important bill to lift up and ask your members of Congress to support. Two others are around paid leave. One is the Healthy Families Act, and this is a bill that would set a national standard for paid sick and safe days to allow workers in businesses with 15 or more employees to earn up to 7 job-protected paid sick and safe days each year. So things like allowing time to recover for your own illness, access preventative care, provide care to a sick family member, attend school meetings related to a child's health condition or disability, and allow workers who are survivors of domestic violence, stalking, or sexual assault to use their paid sick days as safe days to recover or seek assistance related to an incident. All these reasons may sound very familiar for why every day people have to leave work. And unfortunately, many people are fired or pushed out of jobs or can't afford to do this and have to make devastating choices because they don't have this type of paid leave. And relatedly, there's another bill in Congress called the Family Act, and this bill would provide workers with up to 12 weeks of partial income when they take time off for their own serious health conditions, the serious health conditions of a family member, the birth or adoption of a child, or to address the effects of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, or for certain reasons related to military deployment. Very important. So many of us take for granted paid family medical leave, but we are a lucky few. And this type of leave is necessary. And you can hear that from these last two pieces of legislation, people have to sometimes make the decision between taking care of a family member or ensuring they have a job. And these things are not fair and have a disproportionate impact on women. But I also want to flag, that these are the bills that we're organizing around today, but there are many policy solutions for that would help working moms. And Equal Pay Today, with the help of all of the groups on this webinar, as well as many of our other members, contributed to a recently published 2023-2024 policy agenda that identifies key pieces of state and federal legislation and federal executive branch action that would address the multiple drivers of the pay gap, from, as we've discussed, pay inequality and lack of paid leave, to occupational segregation, to workplace harassment, to caregiver discrimination, very relevant today, and more. And we need, as you heard Jennifer discuss, we need to build and support our care economy that is primarily borne by women. So you can check that out at equalpaytoday.org. And lastly, and maybe we'll be able to get to this a little bit more in the Q&A, but I'll flag that the EEOC has recently released proposed regulations implementing a collective victory that we've all worked on, regulations implementing the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And there's an open comment period until October 10th. And so we hope that folks will submit comments in support of the rule. So I just want to wrap up, and I'll turn it back to Megan by just saying that we know that moms are the backbone of our society. They're dedicating their time and effort to both their families and work. And our laws and our workplaces grew up around people who had someone else, usually of a different gender and a different race, taking care of kids and elders at home. And so when women, primarily women of color, are also workers and moms, our system may not have been designed with them in mind, keeping them at a disadvantage, hence many factors of the motherhood penalty right there. So we have some victories to celebrate with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and the PUMP Act. So we are making progress, but there is much more that needs to be done.
Well, I appreciate the reminder to be optimistic, especially when we're talking about Congress, because there really are places that we can go and have a positive impact collectively, as you mentioned. So I do have a couple of questions that have been shared with us, and I'll direct them to an individual, but feel free if somebody wants to jump in. And Gloria, I want to ask you, we've been talking about some of the policy solutions, but are there practical things that employers can do better to support their employees who are caregivers? And how can we better support women who are returning to the workforce after taking time off to care for their children?
Thanks, Megan, for asking what employers can do, and definitely I want to thank Deb, Jennifer, and Taylor for all of the great information thus far. Employers are really an essential part of the equation, right? And really solving the problem of the motherhood penalty. AAUW, we provide our award-winning salary negotiation training for women, to help women, get paid fairly. But we also know that this is a systemic problem that isn't going to be solved by training one woman at a time. And it's really not about fixing women. And we know that we can't individually negotiate, against discrimination and bias and all of the things that are also a part of the motherhood penalty. So it really is essential that employers provide benefits that really address the full spectrum of motherhood and of family circumstances. And that includes, really investing in sufficient compensation for workers across that full spectrum of benefits. For example, we've talked just a few times already about paid leave, about caregiver leave, and ensuring that those are, not only a part of the discussion when you talk about benefits, but they're actually being implemented as an actual benefit that workers can take advantage of. We talked also about the pandemic. We have seen how flexible working schedules, if allowed by employers, could really make an incredible difference in working spouses and their ability to share those domestic responsibilities and to really work at achieving a better blend of family and work life. Employers can also certainly look at the ways that they are hiring, the ways that they are providing salaries, providing promotions, and all of those employer-related opportunities to really examine them through a gender lens. Because until this happens, with a wider scope, so many working mothers will continue to face limits on advancing in their careers. And we know that that means that women will unfortunately continue to have to turn down opportunities that their employers offer them, or not able to accept promotions, which in turn leads to a decrease in women's ability to advance and for them to take on leadership roles. And obviously, having more women in leadership roles will certainly help get more of these kinds of policies in place. Because not being given consideration for promotions and being passed over because they are mothers, is an unfortunate impact of the motherhood penalty. If these kinds of practices aren't put in place, women will continue to be passed over for opportunities for stretch and other growth opportunities. And it's important to note the motherhood penalty will continue because, women do make career decisions so often based on childcare, as opposed to making that career decision really based on what their career goals are. They really have to take into consideration childcare, thinking about the financial considerations, often more so than whether or not this might be the move that will help me to move forward in my career. And so all of these patterns that contribute to the motherhood penalty, all of these structural solutions are actually needed in order to disrupt them and to really set families and to set women on a more equitable path. And, as Deb mentioned, both government officials and employers play a role in closing the gender pay gap, not to mention the racial pay gap. And it really is a move that will not just benefit women, it will benefit families, it will benefit our entire economy. We need employers to step up.
And it really is a three-legged stool. We talked about government solutions but employers there's some that are definitely doing the right thing. And for those who are, we really thank them. And then there's others who may need the additional urging of state and federal laws to continue doing the right thing. Jennifer, I want to come back to you and some of what you're seeing about the intersections of the wage gap and race. And you talked about especially single working moms and discussions about education. Wondering if there's more that you could elaborate on. What can we do to address the intersectional impact here?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned before, really increasing access is a major thing. So because a lot of student parents are Black mothers, I'm going to go back to student parents because that's what my research is on. Then we need to make sure that we're addressing the specific issues that these mothers face. And not only are a lot of student parents Black mothers, like I mentioned, a lot of them are low income, a lot of them are first generation. So there's so many overlapping issues that this population of moms faces. And so addressing things like college affordability, for one thing, we know that education leads to greater economic outcomes. And so the fact that college is not very affordable is a huge issue. One of the things that the moms in the study that we're currently working on about Black single moms in college, a lot of them mentioned that the Pell Grant was something that really helped them to afford college. And so expanding those need-based grant programs for college is one thing that policymakers can do to help student parents or just, underrepresented students in general access education. And so for me, it really just, it goes back to education because that's such a key piece in when we're talking about the wage gap. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, although Black women are a highly educated group, they do still continue to be paid less. So it's important that policymakers really understand these issues from an intersectional perspective, as all of the other panelists have alluded to. So really just understanding how Black women and Black mothers are uniquely impacted by systemic inequities in the workplace and in education, so that they can create and enhance policies that address their unique circumstances.
Well, thank you for that. And Taylor, every time we talk about the research, I just want to balance it with what more you're hearing, and because your members are living this every single day, and just if you're able to share with us some more of that experience that you're hearing.
Sure. First, I would love to circle back a little bit on like paid sick days and paid leave, and then I would also like to follow up that with another story of one of our members. So we've talked a bit about, thank you, Deborah, for naming the Family Act, and also for naming the Healthy Families Act, because we know, and we know that paid sick days and paid leave and medical leave, we know that they work. We've seen the United States test out a paid sick days and paid family and medical leave emergency program in response to the 2020 COVID pandemic. And this program was highly effective in protecting public health, workers, and helping workers benefit from wage replacement and keeping their jobs. And then workers who also took leave reported feeling a greater peace of mind. These programs also helped businesses and the economy by helping them stay in their jobs. And we also talked about decreasing costs for recruitment and retraining. But now that the sun has set on some of these emergency programs, we see how a permanent program could help us prepare for future public health emergencies and protect workers and their families. There's no question that our economy depends on women's paid and unpaid labor, but moms are being shortchanged on our paychecks because of discrimination and because our economy is punishing caregiving responsibilities that shape the lives that we live. Women are carrying a bulk of the caregiving responsibilities, which we talked about on here a bit. And the National Partnership just released their new analysis on women's unpaid caregiving. And they stated that women are spending 153 more hours than men annually providing unpaid care. That's full work weeks each year of unpaid care. People need the time to take care of their families. They need the days, the sick days. They need the paid family medical leave to do that. And I want to jump back to another story from one of our members. Julia in Washington State was hired for a marketing position advertised at $65,000 per year, but instead was paid $55,000 per year because her employer decided that $65,000 would be too large an increase from her previous salary. And so Deborah uplifted the Paycheck Fairness Act. And this is a direct, real life experience of someone who was penalized and punished for their salary history. To add insult to injury, Julia learned that a male colleague was hired for the same exact position and was being paid much more. The company's explanation for this disparity was that he was fresh out of college and had no salary history. And so they decided to bump his pay, and that was a good starting salary for him. In this particular experience, Julia's 7 years of relevant experience was used against her. And then she was called out for discussing salaries with another employee. And so we see how these policy solutions really they can impact our families and our moms across the country. The Paycheck Fairness Act would have protected Julia in this situation.
And I think that many of us on this panel and many of the folks who are listening, watching this webinar, we had working moms, and we've seen this. And even a colleague of mine was sharing a really similar story of the position was advertised at one amount and was oddly offered something substantially less than that. And we know that these policies work. When the things that we're talking about, they're working at the state level, as Deb said, that there's really good opportunities to build on things that are working, that are effective, and that will uplift everybody. We're talking about Moms Equal Pay Day, but these are policies that are going to impact whole families. The mothers, the fathers, the kids, the entire family. And Deb, are there other, since we do keep talking about this, that connection of, what are some of the other specific pieces that are going to help address this gender-based discrimination?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for, I want to just harken back to something else you said. So thank you for mentioning the optimism that I'm glad that came out, Megan, because we really have to remain optimistic and to continue to advocate for change. It's one thing I know for certain is while it may take decades to pass some of these civil rights laws, if we do nothing, they will never pass. And so that is why it's so important for us to continue, for us to work together for change. And I also want to go back to what something Gloria mentioned, which I agree with entirely, which is it is really, we can talk about tactics, and like today is a tactic for change, and it all leads up towards structural solutions. And it's really I think you said, a three-legged stool, that there's a three-prong approach. And that is, we need, new policies. If we can get them through Congress, great. But we also should be pushing every lever of change that we have. There are amazing things happening in the states. The states are really the incubators for change at the moment. So state changes, federal law, legal changes, new laws, but also with administrations who are friendly to these issues, there are great things that can happen through administrative action as well. So all of that is in the policy change bucket. We also need enforcement of the laws that we have on the books. And I know that the agencies, there are the civil rights agencies and offices in the administration are very committed to this work. I think we need to be advocating for more funding and support for their enforcement. And then the third bucket is really culture shifts, starting with employers. I think Megan and Gloria, you both mentioned that. So at that first bucket, when we're talking about new policies, we've talked about a lot of them: the Paycheck Fairness Act, the Healthy Families Act, the Family Act. We've talked about better and higher paying jobs. So it's not just about equal pay, it's about better pay. We've talked about affordable childcare and debt relief and TANF and more. I mean, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. I think we're just trying to highlight that there are lots of different things that can benefit workers. And as I mentioned, so there's the passing of new policies. There's the funding for enforcement for the employment discrimination and labor laws we have on the books. And we've got new ones on the books. And that's really exciting. And the administration has power too. So as I discussed, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, the PUMP Act also, were major victories. So I mentioned there are the proposed rules on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. So that's important. But there are also proposed rules, or hopefully soon to be proposed rules, with the Office of Personnel Management and the Office of Federal Contract Compliance programs about banning the use of prior salary history in setting wages when you're talking about federal workers and federal contractors. While we continue to push for the Paycheck Fairness Act to ban the use of prior salary history in setting wages, there are things the administration is actively doing to ban that in the workforce that they have power over, which is federal workers and federal contractors. We understand that there was an open comment period with OPM. Comments have been submitted. We're hoping to hear soon back on a final rule about federal workers and not using salary history for federal workers. Federal contractors, the proposed rule is not yet out. So we do hope the administration will be able to get that out for comment soon. But lastly, I will say the third stool, or the third prong of the stool, is that the motherhood penalty is also about cultural stereotypes. We've all mentioned that. So there, in addition to policy change, It's also about public education and communications that accompany policy change. We need, I think, Megan, you mentioned this, and Gloria, we need voluntary corporate change and high road employers to do the right thing by their employees. High road employers can create positive public sentiment, changing hearts and minds. It can influence policymakers to make better laws when they see that the sky isn't falling when changes are being made. But yes, we also need laws that require compliance too. And we've learned over time that as we normalize these changes in the workplace, it changes then reciprocally, cultural norms and attitudes over time. So there's a symbiotic relationship between all these types of changes that we need. Look at how the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is really normalized how companies do business and how people understand their rights in the workplace. And that must continue. And people and policymakers come along and adopt this as normal and important for workers.
I definitely appreciate that. And I'm going to continue with a question for all of you. Just before we wrap up, I'm hearing, while there are a lot of challenges, all of those challenges, there are opportunities. And so if I could just ask each one of you, what gives you hope? What gives you hope? What's the path forward look like? If we continue going in order, Gloria, let me toss that to you first.
Thanks, Megan. That's a great question, because even listening to Deb and Jennifer and Taylor, all of this great research and, some of the really startling statistics, can somehow, I think, make some folks think, how are we ever going to lift ourselves up from that? And what does the future really look like? But I think also in talking about legislation, that also helps to give that optimistic attitude as well, because progress has been made. And I think that's really key. And so when I think about what gives me hope, what comes to mind initially is the fact that, the value of women's participation and, their contributions to the workforce were certainly highlighted during the pandemic. And, employers got the message when women basically left in droves. And it was quite acute that without having women in workplaces, that the economy was suffering and that employers were suffering. And so, growth of the hybrid workplace is increasing. It's something that women are demanding. And, it's added to the fact that women's participation in the workforce has increased because women are able to do their caregiving responsibilities, and be employees as well, and demonstrate that they can, also, ascend to managerial and leadership positions. So that's been really important. And finally, I think that, we have the facts, we have the research, and, certainly we have our own lived truths and those of our supporters and our members, right? And the collective understanding that we really, as women, need to use our power. And certainly we need men to join us, right? Through not just, that three-pronged stool or that three-legged stool, but also, to use that advocacy to really stand up and take a stand and have action at the federal and the state level, because, motherhood should not be a penalty. And we should really focus on, the power of mothers and not the penalty that happens when women become moms.
Jennifer, I see you nodding. What's giving you hope looking forward?
Yeah, honestly, conversations like this give me a lot of hope. I'm new to like the nonprofit space in DC, and kind of with IWPR, we have a policy team. So learning about like all of these different things and learning from people like Deborah and Gloria and Taylor, it's just really inspiring. And as Deborah mentioned, a lot of times these types of changes do take a very long time, but if we don't do anything, nothing will change. And so just continuing to fight the good fight, so to speak. I do believe that together we can move the needle on these issues. Again, it may take a long time, but we have come a really long way. We have a ways to go, but it will happen. I think another thing that gives me hope is just thinking about how we can frame these types of issues so that policymakers, for example, that may not have cared about them before will care about them. And I think it's important, like someone mentioned before on the panel, to remember that moms really drive our economy, and investing in moms, investing in the most marginalized groups will help propel us forward. And it's good for all of us if we do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Taylor and Deb. Taylor, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think one of the things that really gives me joy and then gives me hope is seeing moms and women like Julia and Amanda that I shared their stories today use their voice, their lived experience, their power to advocate for themselves and for others. And I feel honored to be among them. I feel honored to be among moms and to represent moms and their voice and how these policies impact everyday life, right? So a lot of times we talk very high level and we're talking about the policies and the statistics, but I think bringing it down to what a day in a life looks like for a mom, for a woman, for someone trying to keep their family together and put food on their table. I think for me, they are what gives me hope that things are going to change, and that they are going to speak truth to power, and that we will see a shift like we've been seeing with the Pump Act, with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, with the state level work. They are what is driving this. We are vessels and we are the vehicles for getting it where it needs to go, but they are driving our work. And I just feel really grateful to represent them and to be among them.
Thank you. And Deb, we've been talking about all this policy change and the optimism here, and what's driving you?
Yeah, well, driving me and giving me hope. And we've all said it, change is slow, but it does happen. And I think the thing that gives me hope is the people. It's the people here, right, who are committing their time, their livelihoods, their careers to making change. It's to students that I get to talk to who are like, this is what I want to do. I want to go out and do this. And so that you're passing on to the next generation. And it's also like the fierce people that I have met, as I started as a litigator and then moved into advocacy. In this instance, the stories of the moms, but on every civil rights issue I've worked in, it's the people who are not doing this professionally, who have struggled and sacrificed and suffered because of discrimination, and yet find the bravery and the strength to come forward when we often know that that people who step forward on issues are sometimes traumatized and victimized, and life is harder for them, and they often don't see the success of their own stories. So those stories give me hope. And I'll also say that allyship, I'm a student of civil rights history. I'm a nerd like that. And, none of this can be done unless we are all working together, lifting up leaders in the space, standing in allyship and support. And so that when I see us collectively coming together to affect change, it just buoys me. So, so thank you to you all for having us here today.
I think that I want to also give my thanks to all of you. We're at the time of year right now in mid-August where we're not celebrating the unequal pay, but we are honoring all the working moms who are out there every day. And this time of year, as they are if they have school-aged kids, it is, packing up the books, getting the book bags ready, sending the kids off to school. And I think all of us are working for a future where that working mom is being paid her full value. If her kids are sick, she's not penalized. She can take that time that she needs. And in the spring, when those kids are graduating from preschool, going to kindergarten, or graduating from high school, hopefully heading to college, that she can take that time off and be with her family and be refreshed and recharged and be continuing a vital worker for our economy, for her personal economy. So we know that that's the future, and we know that there's been tremendous progress made and tremendous opportunities still ahead of us. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Gloria with American Association of University Women, Jennifer with the Institute for Women's Policy Research, Taylor with Moms Rising Together, Deborah from Equal Pay Today and Equal Rights Advocates, and all of our coalition partners who have come together behind the scenes, who are all part of this collective effort. So with that, I want to wish everybody thank you for recognizing with us Moms Equal Pay Day. And I would be remiss if I didn't just throw out there, we are recognizing various equal pay days throughout the year. Black Women's Equal Pay Day was just in July, and Latina Equal Pay Day will be in October on October 5th. So we'll continue to look at how these issues are impacting particular groups of women. But thank you for joining us today in celebration of moms.